I'd like to introduce our host and psychotherapist for their series, I Am Not Okay, Kim Christing. Kim is the founder and executive director of Bay Ridge Counseling Centers and Human Strong, which is part of the Bay Ridge Circle of Care. He is an author and creator of several mental health programs in the area of mood disorder and anger management. For several years, Kim hosted a call-in national talk show called Nightlight and has appeared on numerous national talk shows speaking to the issues of mental health and relationships. Over his 40-year career, Kim has intimately worked with thousands of individuals, couples, and families to help navigate the challenges of mental, emotional, and relational health. Please welcome Kim Christing.
Amy, thank you so much. It is indeed an honor, and I'm really excited to welcome Brian Robinson and Kip Baldwin to the show I Am Not Okay, and is work your secret seductor. And so let me just share a little bit of background on our guest today before we start into our conversation. Brian is a psychotherapist in private practice and professor emeritus at the University of North Carolina. He's an award-winning author of 2 novels and 40 nonfiction books. He has appeared on 2020, Good Morning America, ABC's World News Tonight, NBC Nightly News, and the CBS Early Show. He has as well hosted the PBS documentary, Overdoing It: How to Slow Down and Take Care of Yourself. One of his books, called Chained to the Desk, a guidebook for workaholics, their partners and children, and the clinicians who treat them, is in its 3rd edition. He developed the work addiction risk test that is used around the world. His latest book is Chill, Turn Off Your Job and Turn On Your Life, and some daily writing on resilience, 365 meditations and inspirations for writers. He's a contributor on leadership and careers for Forbes, Thrive Global, Psychology Today, and The Big Thrill. He also writes a monthly column on resilience for Killer Nashville magazine and co-hosts the international live webinar Resiliency 2021. He lives in Asheville with his spouse, 1 Yorkie, 3 golden doodles, along with the occasional bear at night. I assume that they visit him. Welcome, Brian. Welcome. Glad to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Kip Baldwin knows his purpose for being is to share all that love is. Through his many solution-driven projects using media in all its forms to help awaken individuals and by proxy, the collective. He feels that for a new story to be conceived for humanity, a mass imagining of our limitless potential is what is needed to bring about an age of collaboration, compassion, empathy, and oneness. Kip brings over 25 years of entertainment industry, marketing, and product development experience to SOUL called Soul, ranging with the Hearst Ranch and Windy City Novelties to Carlos Falchi Designs and Will Vinton Studios. He is also the co-founder of the United Filmmakers Association. In the world of entertainment, Kip has produced many works including Loophole, Restorations Unlimited, Breaking Bud, The Road to Fenderville, 100 Things, Cold Pressed, and Love Floats. He also co-created the popular and influential reality series Weed Country in cooperation with Studio Lambert and the Discovery Channel. Welcome, guys, to our conversation today. And we're going to try to drill down in talking about mental health and our relationship with work. While so many of us sit with financial advisors dreaming of retirement and not having to work, we are secretly in love with work, often putting it ahead of marriage, our family, and even our own health. In fact, some of us don't even feel normal unless we're busy. So, gentlemen, I'd like to throw out this first thought and question, and I'm just so excited to hear some of your thoughts on some of these things. So The first question I want us all to talk about is, was there ever a time when you were internally not okay, but you were not aware of it, or you ignored it and you focused on work as a way of distraction?
I can certainly begin because I got into this area simply for that reason. I did everything with my work, or I have done everything with my work that my dad did with his bourbon. I overindulged. I hid it. I sneaked it from my family when they complained. I got high from the adrenaline and the cortisol. I went through the depression of the withdrawal. So I use the word work addiction because in the work that I've done, I've noticed that a lot of the people, hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked to often have had this experience because of their own anxiety. There's something about, for some of us, the connection with work preempts the connection with people. And that feels safer for some of us. For me, for a long time, it did. I remember specifically there was, when I was teaching at the University of North Carolina, there was a weekend when I had nothing planned. And I remember I was overwhelmed with anxiety. And then I picked up the newsletter and there was a call for grants. And as soon as I saw that, I immediately got the information, put it under my arm, like somebody putting a bottle under his arm, as I walked to my car, and I felt completely at peace. So
anxiety, can I?
Yes.
So what came first, the addiction or the anxiety, you think?
Well, the anxiety, yeah. With most people that I've worked with who have used their work as a seducer or have been seduced by their work, often have an anxiety disorder, and they're using the work to assuage the anxiety. And many of them don't even realize that that's happening because they're so connected to the work and they're so disconnected from their families, their spouses if they're married, and their kids. They don't even realize the function that the work is doing. And then after a while, it takes on an addictive quality, just like alcohol or food for some people.
Wow. For you, Kip?
You know, my journey has been a little bit different in the sense that I grew up in Washington State, farm boy. We raised thoroughbred racehorses. And I had an experience of spontaneous enlightenment, if you will, at 12, although I didn't know that at 12. And growing up in Washington, unlike growing up in India, it wasn't really recognized. So I had to figure out what this was on my own. And my journey has really been, and I've really realized this recently, has been almost kind of a Buddha journey where I've gone and I've done the things I've wanted to do in my life. I've had jobs that to pay the bills. And my work has never been separate from the things I love doing and the people I love doing it with. So I've never had that relationship to work where it became an addiction or took away from my life. It's the things that I work on are my life. Having said that, I did because of the system and societal constraints and trying again to figure out who I was on my journey. Have gone through, I dealt with a long period of alcohol addiction, which I quit, 13 years ago. And at that point, I was literally, I lost half of my liver function. If I didn't quit drinking, I was going to die. But that's not why I quit drinking. I would have gladly found a quicker way out if I didn't find happiness and my purpose for being here. And that's when sort of my experience when I was younger came to fruition with the work I'm doing now, which is love. And this experience I had with Infinity at 12, they all were the same thing. And that this connection that we all have and share, that became my foundational reason for being here, to help people understand what love really is and what they really are, and to try to take people to their source so that they can ground themselves in that ultimate truth, that supreme reality of what they really are. So when they're here, have whatever experience you want. If your role is to be Donald Trump, great, but at least ground yourself in that ultimate truth so you know this is just a role. This is not what I am. So I've never had that same challenge with work becoming an addiction, but I certainly understand the addiction aspect of it. And for all the things that I've gone through in my life, and there's been a lot of challenges, I wouldn't trade anything for the simple reason, just even with the addiction, while I haven't had the same addiction experience, I can share an understanding of that addiction experience. So when I'm talking to people or mentoring people, it can come from a place of shared understanding from all of these experiences I've had, bad and good. And I also want to make a real point that so much of what we're dealing with and so much of the mental illness and addiction is definitely an illness, comes from the system itself. In indigenous cultures, they did not suffer the same amount of mental illness, addiction that we do in this culture. And this isn't an ancient thing that we need to look back to see evidence of this. There's a film called The Economics of Happiness, which shows what happened in Bhutan over 40 years, pre the introduction of capitalism, post the introduction of capitalism. So much of what we're feeling like right now is a loss of tribe, a loss of purpose, a loss of support. And just to make one last point, to my mind, pain is to suffering what pleasure is to addiction. When you become too attached to these things, when you take that second arrow and they become your identity, that's when you get into trouble. Pain and pleasure are just part of the story. Allowing them to turn into suffering or addiction are things we have a choice over.
That I like what you're saying. So, did we get sold a bill of goods in following the American dream? Success, and to what degree have we capitalism and American culture or Western culture has fed that aspect, and how much is that is that part of the Kool-Aid?
You know, when I was in Peru, I spent a lot of time in the Amazon jungle. And on the way back, one of the things I noticed is I never saw a parent hit a child or yell at a child. It was always, even if the child were misbehaving, it was always a loving, gentle kind of guidance. On the plane, I was talking to one of the flight attendants, and I said, I love your culture. I love being here. People are so laid back, and it's like Kip, you were saying. And she said, yes, but we love your technology. And I kind of felt chills because once I landed back in New York, this was, I don't know if you remember when parents had leashes on their kids, and they were in the airport and the children were on leashes. And it just smacked me in the face, the difference in our cultures and what we've become. Now, I grew up in the South, you can probably tell from my accent. And things were slow and quiet. But in addition to the culture, what my experience has been is most of the people that I have spoken with who use work as a seductor grew up in what we call dysfunctional families. And I think that's partly due to the culture, right? I mean, everything is connected, systemic. And the word dysfunctional, I know, is so general, but I've been amazed at not only myself, but so many people who have come from homes where they were abused or neglected, or there was drug addiction or alcoholism or perfectionism, which is the other end of the continuum, all of which comes from a bigger place culturally. So I think there are a lot of different aspects that impact us individually.
It's interesting whenever you brought some interesting thoughts from both of you, but Kip, when you talked about coming from a certain place, and so we all heard that phrase. Probably there's a book written somewhere about it saying, if you find out what you love and then you'll never work a day in your life idea. And how do you separate that from drivenness? Because a lot of people could say, I love my work.
Because I don't really plan out anything. I don't feel any pressure. I'm really allowing life to take me where it's going to take me. I had several experiences with this just recently where I was talking with a young man who I'd mentored. He's actually the star of the show Weed Country, and we made friends and have a close relationship. And I was at an event he was at, and he said, all my plans are coming together. And I was listening to him, and I was so excited and happy for him. And then I started really reflecting on what I'm doing right now. Like right now I'm in a studio in Sausalito. We're beginning mixing on 18 tracks of really pretty amazing music that we've been working on, all during COVID. And it hit me that I haven't planned any of this. In fact, the opposite. This was the last thing. If you'd asked me 5 years ago that I would ever be back in the music business doing this seriously at this level, I would say no way in hell. I had no desire to do it. Love music, wanted to do it on my own for my enjoyment. But to do what I'm doing now, I didn't plan this. And it couldn't be more perfect what I want to do. So I don't feel driven at all. I feel very much aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't feel that sense of pressure to succeed. And back to sort of the when I mentioned Bhutan, my measurement of success is my happiness. And to the extent that I can be happy and go with the flow, as I was saying, I try to, and I allow life to open up to me very much like a Buddha journey. I've been provided for. I haven't really planned things in the way that most Americans have been programmed that they need to. But we also need to keep in mind that as Americans, we're a small majority of the world's population. Most of the world lives like I do. They're just trying for daily sustenance and to get by and trusting that they'll be provided for. So we're really the outlier in this rugged individualism. Steinbeck had a quote. He said, Americans will never be a socialist country because they don't look at themselves as the put upon proletariat. They look at themselves as temporarily displaced millionaires. We have a strange set of values in this country. We haven't acknowledged a lot of our own history, from slavery to the genocide of the Native Americans, which is close to my heart because my great-grandfather was Lakota. But even more recently, to take it out of any sort of feeling that I'm coming from a metaphysical, purely spiritual perspective, there was a study done by MIT in 1972 called The Limits of Growth, where they looked at an unlimited growth economy like the one we have. And what they found was that by 2040, we would have complete societal collapse. Harvard just recently did a study to look at the MIT study. What they found was 100% accurate and that we're way ahead of schedule. This is a profoundly dysfunctional system that has driven us is founded in division, is founded in fear and control. And paraphrase Krishnamurti, to be healthy in a profoundly sick society is not a sign of health. If you're unhealthy in this society, great, you're probably exactly where you should be.
I want to flip that around a little bit because most of my career I was driven. But the drivenness was not just from the outside, it was mainly from inside me. So it's not always just outside. It comes from that little voice that I think everybody has, the inner critic, we call it, that says you're not good enough, you can't do it, who do you think you are? Scientists call it, neuroscientists call it the negativity bias. Everybody has it. Some of us have it to a greater degree than others. But it was that inner voice that drove me. And at times there was the outer voice, but it was mainly the inner voice. And here's where I kind of had an awakening experience, Kip. I'm not sure what yours was when you were little. I didn't have mine until I was much older. But I was teaching at the University of North Carolina, and we invited 10 Tibetan monks to come to the auditorium to perform. And I don't know if you've seen them perform, but they have beautiful costumes and they have instruments, and it's just magnificent. Well, the night of the performance, a group of fundamentalists picketed outside the auditorium with signs saying Buddhists worship the devil, and there are all kinds of negative kinds of stuff. I was pissed. But the monks, when they were told stop the show, they went outside, and these people at that point were singing Jesus Loves Me. They joined hands and sang Jesus Loves Me with the protesters. And of course, what happened, they disbanded, which to me, when I saw that, it blew my mind. And I thought the power of compassion to eradicate or to get rid of that kind of negativity, that was the beginning of my shift. You're right. So I have learned to be more drawn as a result of that. Now, it was a path. It didn't happen overnight, but I got into meditation. I consider myself Buddhist. But it was from that event that really impacted me. And it's a way that I try to live. But I feel now I do a lot of things, as people know, because you just read off all the things I do. But I don't feel driven anymore. I feel like it's coming from another place from the inside. And that's the difference for me.
So what you guys are really, you're saying that it comes from another place. But it certainly sounds like you're pretty busy. And from the outside, you probably, looking at your bios, you would say, well, not only are you quite successful, I haven't got a clue how you did all this without being driven, but you're saying that it comes from another place and therefore I'm not addicted to work. Can you guys respond to that?
Well, I'm sorry. You want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, look at it like an athlete being in a zone. I write every day. And what I've realized is I'm not the one doing the writing. Every time I think I am, that's when writer's block sets in. So I think it's similar to that space, getting in that zone of life where, wow, you don't even know how things are happening. They're just happening. And guess what? Whether you're aware of things are happening or not, or whether you think you're consciously in control of them, they're happening. And the most important thing is you're not separate from those things happening. You are those things happening. So the minute you think you're controlling those things, that's when we start getting into trouble. The more we can stay in that, again, like an athlete, wow, I was in the zone. Imagine going through life and being in that zone, only having moments where you get to stop and reflect, wow, look at what just happened, instead of thinking you're controlling what happened.
Right. And what I would interpret what you're saying, Kip, is I'm more open now. When I was addicted to the work, it was closed. The openness, I call it the C spot. And there's research to support this, is when I'm in my C spot, I'm calm, I'm curious, I'm compassionate, I'm just letting things happen. There are a bunch of C words. I'm clear. I used to never understand those things because I was so closed and I was so busy. I was trying to make my life happen instead of allow my life to happen. So it's not what you see on the outside. It's what is going on the inside. It may look the same on the outside, but on the inside, it's very different for me.
Well,
as you know, as a Buddhist, I try not to put labels on things, but if I were to call myself anything, I'd say a non-dualist, closer to Hinduism, which obviously Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism. Right. But like they say in Hinduism, before enlightenment, after enlightenment. Before enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. What's the difference? The resistance ends, and you move into acceptance.
Yeah, that's right.
So you guys are really sounding like this is a description of a state of a spiritual place, possibly emotional place, psychological place, that you no longer are driven and you're finding really it difficult to put names on it. So Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, whatever, has different enlightenment experiences or places to put it in. And it almost sounds like it's just an experience. And from some iron worker out there that is sweating his tail off every day, that is really a hard concept to kind of get.
Let me put it in a different context, because this is the way I talk about it now. I think of, a car. You need gas and you need brakes. From a neuroscience point of view, I spent most of my life with the pedal to the metal. going and I burned out. I didn't have any breaks. Now, the breaks is what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest response, right? People who are married to their work don't have that going for them as much. They're mainly, they've got the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, the stress response. So if you think of a car, you can't get out of your driveway if you just have the brakes on, but you're not going to get where you want to go if you don't have the gas on. So it's really a balance of both. And what I have done in my life is I've brought more of my parasympathetic nervous system that I live from, which makes me calmer and clearer and more curious. And I've developed something called micro chillers. When we talk about meditation, at least when I recommend my patients meditate, they do this. I don't have time for another thing because a lot of them are burning out already. So I developed something called micro chillers that's meditation integration. Because you don't have to sit for 20 minutes lotus style on the floor and burn incense and have a mantra to meditate. That's old 1970s. We know now with the Harvard research that meditation, you can do it. I always meditate in a chair, almost always, or in my car. And I do it all day long, but I don't do it for more than about 5 minutes. And sometimes I do it when I'm walking to my office. I'm just in that moment. I'm looking at the sky. I'm feeling the breeze. I'm feeling my feet. I'm in the present moment. That's all meditation is, really. Or I'm aware of what is going on the inside of me. And I do that 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes sometimes during the day, and 5 minutes in the evening. I've had clients who are in high-pressure jobs who tell me it's changed their life.
So I'm just going to play the devil's advocate, guys, and I don't question the validity of anything that you're saying. However, to a to the average American Canadian out there, that sounds like Christianese. It sounds like psychobabble. It sounds like a lot of blah, blah, blah from Hallmark cards. And can you talk about the fear? So one of the things I wanted to talk about is how is it that work is a way in which we try to control things we can't control? Kip, you had mentioned that as well, and Brian. What is it that we're trying to control? Why? And why?
Our environment. We're looking for stability. We're looking for some sort of promise of tomorrow or whatever we might think success will be. As I was saying, we've lost our tribe, we've lost our support. In large part, we've lost our purpose. The jobs that most people work aren't our purpose. But so much of what you just said all comes from our programming. Okay, you're afraid, but that's not because what we're saying is invalid. It's because your programming is telling you that what we're saying is silly and stupid. Now, in large parts of the world, like I said at the beginning, had I had the experience I had at 12 in India, my life would have been much different than the life that I've had here, because I spent most of my life surrounded by people who had no idea what I was talking about. And it took me until I was maybe 45 to realize that. I was just blissfully unaware. I thought, everybody understands it. But the beautiful thing is if we can move through our programming, enlightenment, awakening, all of this is not a difficult thing. It's as simple as accepting the fact of what is. It's not something that's far out there for some yogi in India or some guru somewhere or some priest somewhere or some saint somewhere. It's for you right now. It's just a matter of being able to accept what is right now. And that's really a challenge for people. And the thing is spirituality and science have now joined hands.
I totally agree. Why is acceptance of what is so hard for us?
Well, because of the uncertainty. Uncertainty is what causes us to want to control. Life is uncertain. Life throws us curveballs. It's innate. I mean, we're hardwired to want to survive, and the survival part kicks in. If my boss is upset with me, that's going to scare the heck out of me, because I might start thinking, oh my gosh, I may lose my job because he didn't like the way I talked to him. So we're hardwired. I mentioned the negativity bias before. So things like that are threats, and we overestimate threats. This is a scientific fact. We tend to overestimate threats and underestimate our ability to handle whatever the situation is. So therefore, we exert more control, especially over situations we can't control, and it throws us into a cycle and causes more anxiety. The key, acceptance, and Kip mentioned that right at the beginning, and I knew in a lot of ways we're on the same page, because acceptance of uncertainty, now I'm not saying that's easy. It sounds easy when I say it, but imagine accepting the uncertainty of the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen right now. So to be able to accept that is not easy to do, and people don't have the skills to do it. But if you can accept whatever happens tomorrow, I was talking to actually a client yesterday, and she had been listening to a podcast, and she said this was somebody who they were having one defeat after another, one negative thing happened. And somebody said, "Oh, good, I'm glad that happened. Oh, good, I'm glad that happened."
Yep.
Which is counterintuitive, but when you accept whatever it is, it brings you incredible peace. It's so counterintuitive. It's like if you're in a riptide, those of you who swim, you want to fight, and that will kill you. You want to fight because your survival brain tells you to. But what you have to do is relax and float parallel, and that's what saves you. If you're on a motorcycle and you are afraid to lean into the curve and you lean out, it can flip you over. If you're a woman having a baby and you tighten up, the resistance is going to cause you more pain and more obstetrical problems. So what we're talking about is counterintuitive, but it is one of the truths of life that when I stop resisting and when I let go and when I just accept what's happening, and it takes time to get there, you have to learn it, everything changes.
I like it.
You know what I love about what Brian just said is that, are you guys hearing an echo?
No.
Or is it just me? Okay, good. Is that Brian said, we're doing this because we're living in fear and we feel we need to, our survival instinct kicks in. By trying to control things and put it both in the micro and the macro, we actually decrease our chance of survivability by doing the things we're doing. Look around us at the collective. We're all saying we want to survive, but we're doing everything against our own survival, the things we need to survive. On an individual level, all that stress and everything we build up, it's literally hurting our own chances of survival.
That's right.
Well, and I love that.
Similar to fighting the rip current.
I love some of that thought from both of your points. And so, how much do we need to teach young men, especially to not fight, to not defend, to not try to protect? I mean, it's counterintuitive, as you say, to actually welcome pain, because without pain, we really don't become aware of our fears and the things that really can kill us, anxiety, stress, etc. How do we do that with young people or with the young men listening today? There
are a lot of ways, but one that comes to my mind is martial arts, because in martial arts, they get the idea of what that counterintuitiveness is. Because Kip, if you pushed me, I would pull you. I would go with it instead of resist. Or if I pushed you, you would pull me. It's another whole way of thinking. So that's why kids who get into martial arts, they start to develop a different way of thinking about what life is and how it works. That's one of the things. And
I'd also, sorry.
Yeah. No, you go ahead.
I was also going to say, Buddhism, it's another way. It's just learning to quiet your mind, getting in that still and quiet space so you can actually have a connection with your true self, is definitely important. But beyond that, I really think for us to change our story, we have to change this foundation of institutionalized fear we're operating from. For thousands of years, we've been coming from the same place. And unless you can call it love, you can call it whatever you want. But unless we change that foundation and that programming that comes out of that foundation, we're going to be trapped in this cycle. Like Mark Twain said, history may not repeat itself, but certainly rhymes. We've been doing this over and over and over and asking these same questions for thousands of years. And the reason the same thing keeps happening is because we keep applying the same thinking over and over and over again.
Certainly, I can resonate with that in terms of the thoughts of positive psychology, in terms of let's focus on what some of you are saying about the creativity and the incredibility that we have within us to be creative, to be imaginative, to look at the positive. And by doing that, and sometimes us psychotherapists have wrongly spent too much time looking at the negative or the wounds or the trauma, and we haven't reached in to say, but let's look at how amazing you are. Let's look at how you actually thrived and survived, and let's look at and think about those for some time. And we have, in some ways, been hyper focused on what's wrong rather than what's right.
Well, now what you're talking about is, I'm glad you said that, Kim, because this is huge. And what you're talking about is perspective expanding, is what I call it. I had a man barrel into my office cursing. It was a tax season. And he said, I've got to pay $1 million in taxes. Well, I couldn't even imagine paying $1 million in taxes. But I said, he was really angry. And I said, well, how much did you make? And he mumbled something like 10 million, 12 million. So the session was about expanding. He was focused. That's a survival brain. I call it the zoom lens. He's focused on he has to pay $1 million in taxes. I helped him expand his perspective. You made $10 million. How many people on this planet make that much money in a year? That's one example of how, and if they're kids, we want to help kids look beyond their immediate perspective and learn to enlarge it. There's a lot of research on this coming out right now of how when we are able to, I'll call them perspective expanders, when we're able to look at a situation in a different way, we feel different inside, and it becomes muscle memory eventually, so that we're able to look at the upside of a downside situation, find the opportunity in the difficulty instead of the difficulty in the opportunity. So these are things that have to be taught, because the survival brain is always going to look at the negative if we're threatened. And so it's learned to be able to open that lens. I call it the wide angle lens, like of a camera, and look at it that way. And you feel different. I mean, it changes your whole, not only how you're thinking, but how you're feeling.
I couldn't agree with you both more. Literally everything is all a matter of perception. In fact, one of our songs is called A Matter of Perception. And that experience I had when I was 12, and I'll give it to you really quickly since I mentioned it. My dad and I went to see the Seahawks play in 78, 77, about a 12-hour or 5-hour round trip, got home. Little 12-year-old boy went to bed, left his body, floated out over his, not in that body, out of the house, out of the solar system, across the galaxy, across the universe, facing the universe. Got the perception of how everything interworks and flows. Then I was turned out towards the infinite. I realized there can't be a beginning or ending to anything. And that became my point of seeking for the rest of my life, was infinity. What that did, one, I came to embrace and not shun the unknown, realizing I could be for 1 trillion existences, and I'm no closer to the end of this journey or an ultimate answer than I am right now. And also the perception, that far earth perception, to actually see our interconnectedness with everything, to see that we're just cells in a much larger entity. But it all is a matter of perception.
And to go back to your original question, Kim, I think being a role model and for kids to see, how do we handle stress? The Buddha talked about the first and second arrows, and I call them zingers. The first zinger is not what causes me to suffer. It's what I do with it. And when I throw the second zinger at myself, then I'm going to be miserable. But I have power. I have a choice with everything that happens and whether I react or whether I respond. And that's where my power comes from. That's a different way of perceiving your experience in the world.
We're playing with that in terms of in our offices. We're using neurological reconnection and with our children, and letting them play in the area of the fight-flight response, but being calm and being able to breathe and watching the neurological, the biofeedback of their temperature and their heart rate monitoring. And so the skill development of doing this, calming the alarms, calming the fears,
Yes.
being able to accept and continue to function or allow it to come out, they actually begin to play in that arena of connectedness with themselves,
Right.
as well as let their strength come out, which is really quite amazing, because some of them come away and going to school and telling their teachers, "I'm sorry, I need to go out to the hall and I just need to relax and center myself because I'm being anxious." Or the parents are coming back saying, "What in the world are you doing with this kid? He hasn't had a meltdown for so long." And so when we talk about workaholism or fears and drivenness and ADHD and anxiety, there's so much connected. And then when we talk about with some of the spiritual anchors that we have, the connectedness we need to do, as Kip had said, and you both said, we really need to do better at trying to connect the various aspects of our world rather than dividing, and learning to help each other develop those skills.
Connectedness is one of the C words that puts you in your C spot when you're connected with yourself and other people. One of the techniques that we use a lot in North America is parts work. And what that means is I have my anger, I have my anxiety, I have my worry, I have my control. None of those are who I am. They're aspects of me. And once kids get this quicker than adults, by the way, when we talk about parts. I mean, you hear people say, part of me wanted to watch the football game and another part wanted me to go on the picnic. We use that language all the time. But once you start to realize I'm not my anger, and I've developed something called the AAA, which is aware, acknowledge, and allow, is when I feel anger or I feel anxiety, and I'm turning my head, once I'm aware of it, I acknowledge it on the inside. I'd say something like, anger, I see you're really pissed off today. Okay, tell me what's going on. Now, this sounds odd to people, but this is based in neuroscience. Because as I do this, and sometimes it will speak to me and tell me why it's upset, what happens is it widens my perspective. It's almost like I'm talking to another person and getting a different point of view. The other thing it automatically does, it moves me into my C spot. Now, the third A is allow. It goes back to what we talked about, the acceptance. You can be here. I need you, because if somebody's trying to hurt me, I need you to come on board and help me out because I know you're protecting me. But right now, I can handle this. And then what happens is I feel calm. I feel clear. Now, just knowing that you are not your workaholism, that's an aspect that blends or takes over. And once you can get a little bit of separation, not fight it. We're not talking about fighting. We're talking about befriending. And once you have a relationship with it, then you live from that C spot again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to offer a different perspective on connectedness, just on the sense that I mentioned it earlier, this idea that we're separate from anything is really a mental illness. It's really part of the insanity of Western civilization, if you will. And even from the scientific perspective, if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, how can you be separate from anything else in the universe? It's like saying a leaf on the farthest branch of a tree isn't connected to the seed it came from. The most indigenous cultures understood this instinctively. We've literally programmed this out of ourselves, but somewhere inside ourselves, we know this doesn't make any sense, and we long for that connection. And part of this loss of connection and being told, no, I'm a wrecked individual, is really at the source of so much of our frustration on a daily basis in our lives with our friends, our family, our community.
Well, I think this is fascinating, an interesting conversation about being the connectedness and the fear of connectedness, the fear of vulnerability. And I think, Brian, you mentioned it earlier at the top of the program, where you talk about that people often get lost in work as a way to avoid from being
right
with people, or to be, another way of saying it is to be known. And then we could also talk about, at least in my perspective, that one of the values, whether it's psychologically or relationally, emotionally, but spirituality has a way in which we are able to look at ourselves and bring a sense of acceptance of parts, as you said, and being able to be okay with those parts and look at them. Because I think we could talk about the male ego. We could talk about our sense of pride, that sense in which we have to protect from the pain of looking at ourselves and saying, oh my goodness, I'm not as strong or as tough or in control as I thought. And sitting with that, and I guess that kind of goes back to Kip and some of the other points how love and empathy and sitting. As therapists, we know what the value of when someone sits and actually has this experience of someone listening to them without judgment is transformative at times.
Yeah.
And so it's whether it's with the children you talked about, how we talk about children or others, it seems to be something that we need to embrace rather than cause division, especially in our cultures, and judgment is so much part of how we protect ourselves.
Well, I agree with what Kip, I was just going to say, I agree with what you said. I think we all are one, but most of us are so far removed from understanding that because of fear, because of some of the survival stuff. But I think that's the answer, is for all of us to realize we're much more alike than different. And
absolutely. And those differences are magical. That's where we grow. That's where we learn to evolve. Imagine if we changed our perception from looking at everything with the eyes of fear and fearing life, afraid to die, and looked at loving life and loving to live and loving everything about it.
Why that experience that I mentioned with the Buddhists, I mean, they were from another culture. And look what they taught me. They changed my life just by being who they were. You're absolutely right. And I think that's the key for all of us. I think the people who were demonstrating were afraid. They didn't understand. These people had on garments that they had never seen before and headdresses. And I think it just freaked them out. But the things that freak us out are often the blessings that, can make our lives rich.
Absolutely.
Well, I love this conversation and some of the thoughts. Now, are you now these days ever not okay?
I am sometimes, but not as frequently.
All the time. Exactly.
It never goes away. You know why? Because we're human.
I'm a work in progress.
I am too. We're all human. Yeah, there are times I get upset when my computer goes off or my printer jams. That's what really sets me off, but I'm learning.
You can't get the phone to work before an interview.
There you go. Yeah. I'm learning that those obstacles are teaching me, though, and what can I learn from this, which allows me to accept it as it is and not have it be something else. But yeah, and everybody listening, life is always going to keep bringing things to our doorstep. That's never going to change. I have to be the one to conform to life. Life's not going to conform to me. Wow. That's the key. If people think that life's going to get better for them, they're badly mistaken. As old as I am, I used to think things would get better. They do get better if you get better. But
and to speak,
you've got to be able. We all have to be able to handle life differently. Is what I'm saying.
And what I was going to say, speaking directly to people who are trying to overcome addiction to anything. moving into that place of acceptance. I forgot exactly what I was going to say there. But I was going to say, moving into that place of acceptance, realizing that your life, like since I've quit drinking, my life didn't change at all. People died, horrible things have happened, but my ability to deal with those things, my perception of what those things are has changed entirely. But the things that are happening, again, back to chop wood, carry water, I'm still chopping wood and carrying water.
Yeah.
And still knocking my phone over.
There's an old quote, I think Anastasia Zen, I can't remember how to pronounce her name.
Anis Nin.
Thank you. Anis Nin. I cannot see life as it is. I only see life as I am. I see the world as I am. And that is such a truth. We all, from our own experience, our own perspective, you can have two people on a plane, both who've never flown before. One's terrified the plane's going to crash. The other is so excited she can't stand it. They are having the same experience, but it's two totally different experiences. And that's what life is. But you can shift that experience, as Kip was saying. You can shift it, and that's where our power comes from, knowing we can look at it in a different way.
I love that.
Your ultimate control. You don't have any control. Anyone who thinks they have any control over tomorrow is out of their mind. But what you do have control over is how I'm going to be regardless of what happens next. Am I going to be fear or am I going to be love? And that changes everything. It's how you're going to be regardless of what happens, not what happens.
That's right.
It's how I'm going to be before what happens.
That's right.
And can you choose that and it will happen?
You can choose it. And you know what? Viktor Frankl has a famous quote, the psychologist, between the stimulus and the response. In other words, whatever happens and my reaction to it, I have a choice. Most people run roughshod over it. But once you realize there's a space there, there's a gap. And in that gap, I have a choice. And that's where my freedom comes from. And he did that as a result of being Auschwitz and Dachau. That's how he survived when people were dropping dead around him. Most of us now are not in concentration camps. It can feel like it. We're in our own little prison that we unwittingly create. But that's the key from everything I know. And then your science is now starting to show that.
Well, I like that a lot.
To throw something
so just let me jump in there. So sure. That space that you mentioned there between where choice can take place and life can be much different is the same thing I think about in music, that the magic of music takes place between the notes.
Yes.
And it's in that space that I think we've talked about, that where we feel the strength and we're open and we're letting go, that actually the magic and the music of life can take place, and love becomes experienced, and we are expanded. We feel the expanse. Our lungs, our emotions, our mind can be expanded, and that becomes an experience that, whether we call it emotional, psychological, spiritual, it does not seem to be enough to be held in any one of those containers. I'm still chopping wood, I'm still hauling wall, but it's this unique space that we want to dwell in and we look forward to, because when I am in those spaces, I am amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The zone.
And so is everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and the ego does not want to hear this. And your audience will probably think I'm crazy when I say it. I don't believe we have free will. And from just a scientific perspective, by the time I'm even aware of my thoughts, it's the past. So who made that choice? And again, if I do have any control over, it's how I'm going to be regardless of what happens. That to me is the only real control we have. I'm here to play a role. Who created this? Who wrote the story? I don't know. Is it all just happening? I don't know. But I know that logically, it doesn't make sense for me to say I'm the one making the choices if I'm not even aware of my thoughts until after they've happened.
Interesting. Gentlemen, wow, this was fun. This was, you've stretched me. You have helped, I think, so many people in some of our questions. Hopefully there's a lot of help. I think we it doesn't just take a village to raise a child. I think it takes a humanity to raise a man or a woman. And hopefully we have been sharpening iron for a lot of people. Thank you so much for taking your time and giving towards this whole challenge that for mental health and for work and our fears and finding some places where we can find a place of acceptance. I so appreciate giving your time.
So much love to both of you. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure meeting both of you and having a conversation with you. Thank you so much.
As well as you too.
Truly sacred.
Thank you, all of you.
Take care.